problem. How can we deal with this? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Simiyu Werunga. I run a small organization called African Center for Security and Strategic Studies. I've been asked to discuss and talk to you, engage you in a discussion about police reforms. Actualization of police reform since we started in this country.
You need to place this.
Yeah.
Where?
Here.
But now, Ashikili.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
Try and deal with it. And this is going to be premised on the fact that the country is experiencing a lot of insecurity, and the imagination that probably if this country undertook security sector reform seriously, things will have been different from what we are seeing today. But I don't want to forget something that Eva touched, that touched on me as a member of the Nyumba Kumi initiative. While I'll speak about it later as one of the elements of things that we are going to do together, I think was made by a political leader. Nyumba Kumi rollout and actualization is going to be done by a technical team, a task force in which I'm a member. While the thinking and the origin of the word is Tanzania, I want to promise you Kenyans that ours is not going to be anywhere near the Tanzania model. We've been around for 6 months, and one of the reasons why we've not even come back to the public is because we are doing all that it takes to come up with a model that is going to suit the national. We are looking at all models of community policing from Tanzania, from Israel, from Ethiopia, from Rwanda. People are going to Brazil, people are going somewhere. Then we shall domesticate what is going to be ideal for this country so that we don't repeat the same mistakes we did with community policing and come up with something that is imported to this country and fail again. And I also want to dispel her notion that maybe whoever said Nyumba Kumi, the political leader, did not know about Likodep. But we know Likodep, we know Makadara, because one of the things we are doing is to harmonize all security community initiatives in this country and bring them under a structured national community framework that is going to fit into this country. And the 6 months we've taken, we've been going around this country to look at all initiatives that are taking place, see what is working, and try and put them together so that we have a project that is going to fit within the aspirations of the Kenyan people. That was just about the Nyumba Kumi initiative. So we shall not let you down. And if we think we are going to let you down, some of us will walk out. So let's get back to police reforms. This country initiated police reforms many years ago, and I'm not sure, I hope I'm speaking louder, I'm not sure whether any Kenyan has come across this book. This one. It is called the Police Reform Program 2011-2013. And this is a document that was launched by the government after a process that took place in this country with a view of ensuring that police reforms are actualized because the Kenyan people demanded that to take place. But police reforms did not start after post-election violence. I want to give you a small background where it all started. Around 2003, there was a small task force that was created by the government to look at the standards, institutional capacity, and the welfare of the Kenyan police. And I'll be speaking later how it might not be possible for us to succeed in reining in insecurity when we are not dealing with security sector reforms, because we are all concentrating on police reforms. Police does not work in isolation. If you want to succeed on matters of reforms, you must reform the sector. And the sector has actors. Now, some of these actors form what we call the criminal justice system. So if you reform the police, you don't transform the judiciary, you don't reform correctional services, then really you are not achieving what you want to do. If you are trying to reform the police and you don't reform the governance structures of a country and deal with the treasury that is supposed to be made aware that you need money to reform the security sector, then you are not going anywhere. So I think one of the biggest problems we have in this country, we've concentrated on reforming the police, which is just one of the actors in the national security sector reform agenda. So we started in 2003 when a small task force was created by the government to look at the welfare and institutional framework of the police. This task force gave way to another technical team that was calling itself the Steering Committee. In 2009, between 2004 and 2005, it made a report and worked on the TORs that were to be used by the Ransley team. But within those two frameworks, there was a GGLO thing. Governance, Justice, Law and Order sector program was actually taking place in this country. And at that moment, when some of us were involved, and I think my friend here, Namwaya, was part of this team. Namwaya, I think you are with me, on the GGLO program, we thought that was the best way to go. Actually, there was a lot of money in the first GGLO program, and it was a basket fund. The idea was to ensure that all these sectors, actors in the sector are reformed, so that we have a sector that has been reformed to merge with what we thought in 2002, 2003, and 2005, an emerging and very vibrant democracy in this country. So the thinking was, this is the right time. The president has been elected with a leading majority for the first time in this country. So democracy is actually peaking in this country. So let's also run with security sector so that when we look at them in totality after 5 years, then we shall have seen a country that is on the path to middle-level income. I think we were wrong. So we hit a wall, and then we go to 2007 elections. All of us know what took place. Without a reformed police, without a reformed judiciary, with a prison service that was actually hardening criminals as opposed to correcting them and rehabilitating them, and with a Kenyan population that had lost faith in the political system in this country. So after the elections, after the violence, many call this country a post-conflict state. I train a lot on matters of security sector reform, and every place I go outside this country, Kenya is now rated as a post-conflict state. But when you define what a post-conflict state is, it becomes a debate whether ours is a post-conflict state or ours was a state that went through post-election violence. One of the cardinal things you look at a post-conflict state is where institutions all collapsed, governance is not there. Dr. Werunga talked about states' inability to secure its territory. In another word, we call it distant decay, where the state's security apparatus shrink slowly from the borders of the country and shrink to the center, and in the process create vacuums where organized crime and other belligerents take over and actually they start managing those sections. This was seen as some time in Mathare, where the government withdrew, the Mungiki team took over, and actually it was extorting money and the people were paying for that. So our reform process has been ongoing for a while. But after the post-election violence, after the Waki team, the government actually embarked on a very serious and, of course, duress from the international community to reform the police. Because one of the things that was discovered after post-election violence is that police contributed heavily on the deaths that were experienced in this country. So the Ransley team was commissioned, it was given the mandate to work on this, and the Ransley team actually came up with close to 207 recommendations. But these recommendations were anchored and reduced into 4 pillars. First pillar was to look at the legal policy framework that governs the police system in this country. Pillar number 2 was to look at the efficient and sustainable reforms concerning the institution of the police and what needs to be done, how it's supposed to be done, which structures are we supposed to put in place so that we enhance and ensure that the reforms in the police are sustained. Pillar number 3 was enhancement of professionalism, integrity, and accountability of the police service. Pillar number 4, to strengthen the operational capacity and preparedness and the logistical capacity of the Kenya Police. All those 207 were collapsed into those 4 pillars, and each pillar was given a timeline on which all those things were supposed to be done. So under the legal framework, it was suggested that we must have a new police act, we must have a civilian wing that will take care of the human resource capacity and administration of the police. It was decided that we must create an arm that will be an avenue for the Kenyan people to complain and the police themselves to complain. It was decided that for us to have faith in the CID of this country, then we must establish a national coroner's service that will be dealing with matters of homicide in this country, will be independent, and will be headed by a coroner general. Then lastly, the 5th was that we must have a regulatory mechanism to take care of our private security industry functionaries, because as we speak, there's no regulatory framework that governs the private security industry in this country. The thinking was that if we put them together into this, then we shall be able to hold them to account in the event that they lapse in what they were doing, because as we speak, and this is a conservative figure, this country has between 300 and 350 members in the private security industry. So if we can regulate those fellows and see how they can work together with the police under community-based policing, then the thinking was that we shall be able to start taking charge of our problems, because we have a system that we can now regulate, a system that will be given standards for them to operate in, a system that has a reporting system where if they don't do things well and they recruit people who are not trained, then the owners and proprietors of such a companies will be held to account. So those were the 5 legal frameworks that we looked at under pillar number 1. The second one was policy frameworks. This country did not have a national security policy. This country did not have a crime prevention strategy paper policy. This country did not have a community-based policing policy. And this country did not have anything on security. So we said, how do you rule this country for 50 years and you have no national policy on security? So it was decided that all those things were supposed to be put in place so that we can hold somebody to account as a country and say this is what the policy says and you did not do it right. Even if you are the president, you are the cabinet secretary, or you are the principal secretary, or you are the inspector general, we shall be holding you to account through this framework. So all those policies were supposed to be done. As we speak, the national policy has not been actualized on security. We are working on the community policing policy document, but my argument has always been, you are basing this community-based policing document on which document of national security? Because if you don't have a national security policy, which you're supposed to derive any other policy documents, then this one will be overtaking what is very crucial for this country. We are now working on a crime prevention strategy for this country. It has never had one before. After we were made members of the task force, some of the things we said must be done is we must come up with a national crime prevention strategy. We must come up with a national policy on security. We must come up with a national policy on community-based policing. Now, this should be seen from a different perspective. We are looking at it as a people-centered approach. So whatever we are going to work on must be validated by the Kenyan people. And once we get the feedbacks, then we launch the documents. It will be a people-centered document that is acceptable to the Kenyan people. So all those policy frameworks were never there. Then lastly, this country has never had a singular definition of what is policing. So you find Werunga will define what is policing in this country. You find another Kenyan defining it differently, and many countries have a basic modicum of what policing is all about. So that when you ask a citizen of that country what policing is, they'll be able to tell you what it is. That one has never been there, so we are looking at how it can be done so that Kenyans can be speaking the same language. Institutional framework. We moved from a police commissioner, established the IG, established the deputy IGs, created other ranks, and said the two police services should merge. Sorry. As we speak, the challenge is even the two are still quarreling up to today. And the essence was, you've been talking about numbers, let's put you together under one command, remove you from the provincial administration, because that's what the AP was saying, so that we put you under a command of an inspector general, you professionalize you as any other police service, and you work as an independent police service for the nation. 2 years down the line after the act, the two are still having problems, but under the same inspector general. So those are some of the challenges that we are finding as we move on. Professionalization was seen in terms of training. So the first thing that was done was to suggest a new training curriculum, which was done, I think, a year and a half ago. The two intakes that have been in Kiganjo and Embakasi have gone through the new curriculum that was developed. I want to imagine it went through the Kenyan people because we got involved as citizens of this country. And it gives the training period 15 months for a constable and 21 months for an inspector. The last two have gone through that. But even as we speak, there was an element of attachment so that we see what these officers are doing in the field. But the question you were asking, how do you attach them to a station that has not reformed? How do you attach them to a traffic department that has not reformed? So at some point, that attachment was thrown away, and we don't know what they've been doing up to now. So that's another challenge as we look at police reforms in this country. Operational preparedness and logistical capacity. Like one presenter said, no structured preparedness, no structured professional undertaking, no structured acquisition of equipment. And for the last 2 years, even as we speak about enhancing the operational capacity of the Kenya Police, I think some ground has been covered, but generally we still have the same police service that we thought we should be reforming in the last 2 years. The other one was about integrity and accountability. We created the National Independent Policing Oversight Authority. We created the National Police Service Commission, and there was an element of what we call internal affairs unit within the police service itself. Now, we were looking at the internal affairs unit as a unit within the police that is independent, can question the activities of the Inspector General, can rescind some of the decisions made by the Inspector General because it was supposed to be independent officers working away from the police headquarters and be responsible of things that are internally administrative to enhance the welfare and professionalism of the police service. As we speak, that unit is within Vigilance House. The officer who is in charge reports to the Deputy Inspector General, and he gets his funding from the same office. It becomes very difficult for that unit to be independent because they can even be chased away from those offices. So much has been spoken about, much has been written about these police reforms, but within the 4 pillars, nothing really has moved the way Kenyans expected them to move. Now, operational capacity of the Kenya Police. The Inspector General is supposed to be independent as by the law, but it's supposed to be independent operationally. What Godwin was talking about here was to make, people want to make themselves independent from what? The Constitution is very clear. It says all disciplined forces in this country must be answerable to civilian authority. Now, an element of civilian authority in the police structure was the National Police Service Commission and the Independent Policing Authority, Oversight Authority. If you ignore these things and you think you can only report to the head of the country because he's the commander-in-chief, then you are really missing the boat. And these are the problems we're encountering as I speak today, because you'll find most of the decisions being made by the National Police Service Commission, Independent Policing Oversight Authority, are being ignored because people feel they cannot report to those junior civilian authorities. Now, the thinking was, if we have a strategic manager in charge of the National Police Service, then some of these problems we're encountering now will not have been an issue. So within the legal framework, as I repeat, we've passed 3 laws: National Police Service, National Police Service Commission, Independent Policing Oversight Authority. We have 2 pending, the National Coroner's Bill and the Private Security Industry Regulatory Bill. The last time I heard about this Coroner's Bill, it had been passed, it had gone to Cabinet, it was supposed to have been passed, be brought back to the Kenyan people, look at how things are done, put our inputs, then take it back for boss. So that is how the pillars have been tackled in terms of reform. What is the challenge here? Because I have very few minutes on this. One, we've discovered that the police lacks a strategic focus on how to deal with modern crime. The police are still cocooned in the old thinking, with the rudimentary policing, and they don't want to allow new ideas to assist them to police this country in a modern manner. Police are still resistant to change because they feel the status quo made some of them very rich, made some of them demigods, and majority of them have been having ruptures with the Kenyan people without accounting to anybody because they were the law unto themselves. Now, how can this persist for 2 years? My view is that the leadership that we placed to manage our police service has failed. Because the Inspector General was supposed to be a strategic manager. He was supposed to give directions, come up with policies that are derived from the Cabinet Secretary, because within the law and the Constitution, the Cabinet Secretary is the policy maker for the policing in this country. So you derive policy issues from the Cabinet Secretary, implement them within the police service, and ensure that you give us what we feel is the right method of policing this country. It has not happened. While I don't want to divert into what is happening in Isli and into what's happening in other places, you can see for yourself that if the issue, the 3rd pillar of professionalism, had been taken very seriously, we'll be seeing different things in what we are seeing in Isli. we'll be seeing different things in what is happening in Mombasa. But that pillar was quietly shoved aside because their thinking is that once you have a new curriculum, then you are professionalizing. If you recruit 7,000 police officers and you have a number of 80,000, how are you professionalizing the police? By having new recruits who are going through a new curriculum. What about the 65,000 that are already there? Some have never been back to Kiganjo or Embakasi for the last 20, 25 years. So all these things we are seeing is because somebody decided professionalism was not an issue, and it's because of poor leadership. We are now thinking, probably those of us in this sector, that probably we should have taken a civilian to be in charge of this service. And somebody said, but if a civilian is made the Inspector General, the police will refuse to work with him. That is mutiny. In law, we charge all of them 80,000, we put them into the coolers, we bring other people to take charge. The police, the military second role is to assist civilian police in maintaining law and order. I'll give you an example. New York Police. When Mayor Rudy Giuliani took over, because those are executive mayors, he gave a promise to the New York people and said, within my first 4 years, I'll change the notorious New York Police Department and give you a service that will provide service to you people. What he did, he brought in a new police commissioner in the name of Mr. William Bratton. William Bratton at that time was in charge of a small borough within the New York city, and he brought him to be this commissioner of police. He came up with a very simple strategy called the broken window strategy. And within 4 years, the New York State Department, police department, had been changed completely. Why am I giving you this example? Because I'm insisting about leadership in our police service. Give it the right people, and the police will change. In the military and in the police, we like using this word, esprit de corps. Esprit de corps is that if you are one of us, then work within us and don't punish us because you are one of us. If you are one of us, then have a feeling that you are together with us, so don't be very harsh on things that you think. That's why every time you see a problem happening somewhere, the first thing I know CPD will say is to defend his police officers. Now, if that had been changed by a leadership that we thought will give change to the policing in this country, then I think we'll be talking a different story altogether. I want to speak about the Cabinet Secretary. And I'm not an employee of the government, so I hold no brief for them. But I want to say my personal view about the Cabinet Secretary. Now, the Cabinet Secretary's role is to issue policy directions. The person to implement those policy directions is the Inspector General. You don't, and I want to repeat this, you don't have to be a police strategist to be in charge of the police on the political wing. We've had all ministers in this country with no police background. But if you have a team that is willing to support you as a political leader, that is alive to the fact that their duty is to implement what you are telling them, then this issue of our Cabinet Secretary being zero, I think is being misplaced. That fellow, wherever he came from, he just needs to say a word and it is implemented by the Inspector General. He needs to say a word and the Director of Immigration implements. So I think we are looking at this thing from a different perspective in totality. This is the civilian authority we are talking about under the Constitution, and they don't have to be operational. I squarely blame the police leadership on what we are seeing in this country. While I don't want to indulge in the political thinking about policing in this country, because we said under security sector reform, you must also look at the governance issues that govern policing in this country. But I think my thinking, and this is my personal view, is that we need to be looking at the leadership of our police service. And every time something happens very seriously, we are told there's no coordination. We are not given enough information because the NIS didn't give us information. NSI, and let me speak as a person who has passed through this, NSIS never gives information. It gives intelligence. Now, intelligence is not information. Intelligence, we call them intelligence pieces. Intelligence is a piece that has been derived from information that gives you some actuality in what you are being given. It gives you some factuality in what you are being given. It means it's beyond information. So while we've been having a problem about coordination in this country, and we saw it in Westgate, I'm aware that the National Security Council Act is being amended to come up with a structure of coordination. And this is part of what we've been engaging in, because one of the mandates we are given as Nyumba Kumi is to think through and see how we can create a serious, strong coordinating mechanism amongst all security organs in this country under the National Security Council. So we are aware something is being done on the National Security Council Act to see how this issue of coordination is going to be done. I hold no brief. I speak because at the moment I'm privileged to be part of the team that is actually coming up with new ideas on how we can enhance professionalism and coordination in this country. So I think, without speaking too much on these reforms, those are the challenges we are going through as a nation. Those are the things we are supposed to have dealt with under our reform agenda. And for as long as you people do not push, for as long as you people do not make noise, for as long as some of you say, yes, robbers should be killed on the road, we feel the pain when you are carjacked. We feel the pain when your brother is killed. But the law is the law, unfortunately. And somebody said the law is like a three-letter, three-word word. So while it might not be looked at in terms of this is what the law says, we must also look at it that whatever happens in this country, this is a country that is ruled by the law. We say the law is the pillar in this country. So let's look at everything in terms of whatever we do, whatever they do, we must hold them accountable because this is a country ruled within the premise of the law. So that is what is happening in our police reforms, and I think my biggest problem is not that things were not meant to be done. It is just that some people are not doing their things well. The process of police reforms started in 2003. We are now 2014. I'm saying reforms started earlier. I mean, agitation for reforms and whatever started earlier, but the initial steps on reforming the Kenya police started in 2003, when the first small task force was given the mandate to look at policing issues and recommend to the government on what needs to be done. So as we speak today, those are the challenges, and the reason why we are not fighting crime in this country properly is because our reforms have not even gone a quarter. And yet this book that I've just shown you gave us between 2011 and 2013 with a budget of 81 billion. And if we had actualized these police reforms, then we'll be talking a different story. This was never achieved. A quarter has been done, and even the quarter that has been done is not being managed well. So that is where our problems are, and we need to continuously ensure that we have police reforms in this country, agitate for them, and you should be prepared. Never fear, because no change has happened in any country without some sacrifices. That is what I want to say about our police reforms. Now let me touch briefly, how many minutes? Somalia issue. It can be 3 minutes. Briefly, maybe 5, 7 minutes. Look at the background where we started as a country, where the rain started beating us. Now, some of these things I'll speak, some will not agree with me, some will agree. This is what I do for a living. So I do my research, I come with things, some of you will agree, some will not agree. This country, we started losing it. Not the other day. We started losing it when we started allowing everybody in this country to come, bribe their way, and settle. Congolese, Rwandans, I'm told they're called Rwandans, not Rwandese. Rwandans, Ugandans, Burundians, our friends from across the border. I'll give you an example. I've gone to Somalia before this thing was very bad. I've been there 3 times by road. And the farthest town I've gone to Somalia by road is a town called Johan. Johan. You go through Dolo, Baledweyne, Luke, Baidoa down here, Wajid, Johan. Just not very far from Mogadishu. And every town, of course they call them towns, some of them are small villages, but they're towns. Every town you go to, you'll get our Somali brothers, and some of them are very proud to show you Kenyan ID cards. Kenya ni kwetu, Kenya ni nyumbani. But there are Somali brothers with Kenyan IDs. I'm speaking about 2008, 2009, 2010. You go to our border across in Western, the Bagishus, majority have Kenyan ID cards because their cousins and brothers are Bukusus. Down near Busia, majority of Tesos across have IDs, Kenyan IDs, because for some time we were the only country that was issuing IDs around this region. Now, this is the person who will come and live with us, but like they always say, home is home. So that idea of not having a data, a national data for the population of this country has impacted so badly on how security can be managed in this country. When you do modern policing, there's something called crime mapping. When you do modern policing, there's something called understanding and studying crime trends. When you do modern policing, for those people in the NGO world, there's something called scenario development. You get data, you work on it, you develop what this country may be in the next 5 years in terms of policing and crime, because you study them. But when you don't have the national data of the people of this country and the population and their dispersal systems, it becomes very difficult for a country to manage itself. But how did we get there? Corruption. We can say anything about insecurity in this country. Everything will end up in that small debate called corruption. It's very difficult for a Kenyan to get a birth certificate, but it's very easy for somebody to walk in here, pay his or her way, and the child will get a birth certificate. Now, when you go, because when we were doing GGLO with Namwaya here, we went to all these offices, I can confess, and some of them had no records. Am I right, Namwaya? Bureau of Births, whatever, we went. We were looking at these things because we wanted to see how do we merge this to assist the country deal with security problems. You go to immigration, records were in shambles. Now, you want to deal with insecurity with a population that you don't know. You want to deal with insecurity, yet you have no forensic laboratory in this country. You want to deal with insecurity when you have no national crime data center. It is impossible. So Kenya for some time had serious issues about terrorist attacks. Then at some point, there's something called the Kenya Military Authority, together with the National Security Advisory Committee, made a decision to move into Somalia by sending the Kenya Defense Forces. The agenda was brief. Predetermined exit. But the Kenyanness in us overtook our thinking. Then the exit strategy that we thought we knew, or we thought we believed we knew, was shelved. Now, are we talking about the repercussions we are seeing here because we send our troops in Somalia? Not really. Yes, to some extent. But the presence of the Kenyan troops in Somalia is not 100% why we are having problems here. It is something different when you send your troops to take over your security than sending your troops, and when they get there, they start getting engaged in local politics. So two different things. So is it because we have them there, or they went there and started getting themselves in issues that were not supposed to be? That is an issue I leave with you for debate. People say Somalia, Ethiopia went there, they did their thing, they left. Why are we not having attacks in the Ogaden region? Why are we having problems in Djibouti? Why are we having problems in Tanzania? Tanzania never sent troops, but we have a bigger majority of Somali community. Except Zanzibar that we are seeing a few things now, but basically they've taken charge of their issues. When you read and study what is going on in the southern part of Somalia, for those who know the systems in Somalia about the tribes, the Darod, the Hawiye, and the other one, three big major tribes. Probably you don't get there and start involving yourself in who becomes the president of Jubaland or who becomes the leader of this section, because that's not why you went to Somalia. Our military strategy, I believe, was very clear. But at some point, even as you think about a buffer zone, you must also be alive to the intricacies within that country for which we've bordered for many years. So, Jonjo, I think as I finish on this one, what is hitting us here is not the presence of our troops in Somalia. That is our engagement in other issues that are totally outside our military engagement in Somalia. And we need further study on that to see exactly what it is that they are saying. Because I speak because I meet people, I discuss people. My area of concentration as I speak to you is actually, maybe I should mention this. I'm running a small program at the coast. We've just started, but we've been there for a while. It's called Religious Intolerance, Radicalization, and Jihadism. So we speak to people. We want to know exactly what is this problem. The other day I was privileged to speak to a colonel from Djibouti, serving colonel. And the first thing he told me, this man we hear today in Kismayo, even us in Mogadishu, in Djibouti, we never used to hear him. Because I'm gathering data, I'm not saying that's exactly what is happening. But at the end of the day, I'll have to analyze my stories, I have to analyze my whatever I get, then come up with a story that may fit into why we are having serious insecurity problems here perpetrated by people who are telling us through the social media that we shall have rivers of blood and destruction of cities. So I think that's what we need to look at, and that is how, as a country, we should start debating whether it is going there or getting involved in other issues that are not essentially defensive in nature. So once we get that, then we shall be able to answer these questions we're asking. I think with those few remarks, thank you very much.